the redeemed of the Lord say, the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know. Let the redeemed of the Lord know. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know.
It, whatever it is, because what you do not know can hurt you. So let's get to the root. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Letitia R. Stuckey. And for today's episode of Say So, we are going to talk about the umbilical cord. And this topic came up for me when I was going through soul healing and deliverance with Apostle Decor Green, Upper Room Kingdom Ministries, and it was a concept I had never heard or never even really thought about. So I thought that it would be important for me to dig just a little bit deeper to see exactly what is the umbilical cord. You guys have not noticed by the previous episodes, even the soul series on soul cries, on soul ties, and on soul wounds, and then the bastard curse. We've transitioned. We were launching out into the deep waters of spiritual warfare. Bastard curse. We've transitioned. We were launching out into the deep waters of spiritual warfare and deliverance. Because as I said at the beginning of the show, what you do not know can hurt you. And honestly, it probably is hurting you. So we're going to delve a little deeper into the umbilical cord curse. The umbilical cord and the amniotic fluid. Now, these are all things that as mothers or as women, we're familiar with these terms, even if we don't necessarily know what their functions are and what they do inside of our body. But these are all internal workings, so it's something that you can't see with your natural eye. So when all internal working, so it's something that you can't see with your natural eye. So when a woman is pregnant, she has these three things working with her to help her to support the life that is growing on the inside of her. And the individual who authored this article, I can spell it for you. B-A-B. Scripture reference is found in the New Testament book of Romans, chapter 8, verses 31 through 38. This is a sermon for those who have deep-rooted problems with no solution in sight. It takes you to roots and tentacles of your birth spiritually with drastic results. And for me, just to share a little bit of my personal testimony and story of survival, I initially gave my life to Christ at age 7. I rededicated my life at age 15 in the 9th grade as a high school student. And it wasn't so much that I had done so much as a high school student. And it wasn't so much that I had done so much bad or so much sin or anything of that nature, but I just had a better understanding and a better grasp of what I was doing when I rededicated my life versus when I dedicated my life. I had experience with Holy Spirit doing when I rededicated my life versus when I dedicated my life. I had experience with Holy Spirit where I felt his spirit and I could connect with the things of God. And I'll maybe share a story of when I was 7. If I really be honest, at age 7, that's a pivotal age. And there were lots of pivotal moments for me at age 7. So long story short, there was a lot of attempts on my life. I almost drowned at age 7. I almost choked on a piece of candy at age 7. And when I say choked, I was choking and gagging for an extended period of time. So those are some of the pivotal moments or the things that I can remember that just come to mind. But that was definitely a notable age for me. But with me giving my life to Christ at 7, I hadn't lived much of my life. I had experienced trauma. I had experienced sexual and physical abuse. I had psychological abuse and just being treated differently, being wronged, embarrassed, humiliated, things of that nature. So there were soul wounds intact and in place already, in addition to what likely took place for me while I was growing and developing in my mother's womb. Things that likely took place for me while I was growing and developing in my mother's womb. Things that, of course, were unbeknownst to me as the developing fetus. So we're going to delve into the article, and it says, should you choose to research this article, they encourage you to post your thoughts and experiences in the dialogue take place on a child due to the support paraphernalia they are born with. Now, by paraphernalia, we mean miscellaneous articles, especially the equipment needed for a particular activity. So the equipment that we're talking about specifically is the placenta, the umbilical cord, and the activity that this is needed for is to produce, support, and sustain life. And all of us, if you're listening to me under the sound of my voice, then you have had experience with having an umbilical cord attaching you and your mother, having amniotic fluid that's supporting you as you grow in your mother's womb, and a placenta that has amniotic fluid that's supporting you as you grow in your mother's womb, and a placenta that has an individual set of functions as well. There are 3 areas of support system that keeps a baby while it's developing in its mother's womb. All 3 of them are subject to evil manipulations. Now, they're given a real life example of what happened, and this is supporting facts of how these things are subject to evil manipulations. Now, we know that the word of God says the enemy comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. There's not a set age in which he is able to come. He can come. There's not a set age in which he is able to come. He can come in the womb. He can come before you're conceived. He can come through your mother and through your father. There are sins of the mother and sins of the father that are visited upon their children, their children's children, and several generations to follow. So it's a developing fetus or a developing baby. It would be awesome if we were off limits at that time or whatever, but we're unaware of what is taking place. So that's one of the enemy's main weapons, is deception. So if you're unaware, awesome, then you have a lot more to contend with than when it was a little sprout. So seeds are constantly being sown into the soil of our soul as children, as teenagers, as adults, and also while we're being developed in our mother's womb. So this is a real life developed in our mother's womb. So this is a real life example. It says a sister who is a medical doctor went childless and unmarried for 50 years before it was discovered that her placenta had never been buried, but had been hung of their house on the instructions of the witch doctor in their village. Just an example of how our body parts and things of that nature that may seem insignificant to us, because like I said, you can't see it with your natural eye, what your liver, your pancreas, what your heart, what your lungs, etc., the inner eye, what your liver, your pancreas, what your heart, what your lungs, etc., the inner workings of your body looks like. Obviously, for those who have evil intent, they can utilize those things. Even when you think of the witch doctor, when you think of voodoo or people casting spells or hexes or speaking word symbolizes you, or they'll have some part of your DNA, your hair or your clothing, some sort of personal article, which is like a way to channel you and a way to track you in the realm of the spirit. And they'll do things to it or use those things to try to call things into your life and cause things to happen to you, those that are around you. Another example is a nurse was accosted by security guards as she was taking out of the hospital a large bag full of placentas and umbilical cords. Now, when they interrogated her, she confessed that she was taking them to her coven, so she was a witch, where they use it to initiate the children who own it into witchcraft. So these children are unsuspecting, they're just born, and they're taking something personal and their parent, specifically their mother, which we could also look at this as a soul tie, because as we talked about in the soul tie series, there are positive and negative soul ties. The soul tie between a parent and their child ideally would be that of a positive one. Now, when there is abuse and there are other things, would be that of a positive one. Now, when there is abuse and there are other things in play, then it can be an unhealthy soul tie. But you're naturally tied to those whose DNA and genes you share, and who are the very reason for you being here on earth, for you being conceived, for you being born, for you being present. Very reason for you being here on earth, for you being conceived, for you being born, for you being present. It goes on to say the ones whose spiritual makeup is aggressive because of their praying parents, they threw into the river so that the children will be connected to the evil marine manifestation, drowned. Even a lot of our ancestors from slavery committed suicide, or their bodies were dumped in order to murder them, and things of that nature. But there is a kingdom, actually, an evil kingdom called the marine kingdom. So that's where we get mermaids and majestic or mythological creatures such as those of that nature. That's where they come from. It's an actual kingdom under the sea. So the question is now, what is a placenta and what does it do? A placenta has been described as a pancake-shaped organ that attaches to the inside of the uterus and is connected to the fetus, which is the developing baby, by the umbilical cord. So the umbilical cord is the connecting device from the mother to the child. The placenta produces pregnancy-related hormones and is responsible for working as a trading the mother and the baby's blood supply. So this is how they give and exchange blood supply and continue to be alive, because we know that blood is your lifeline. If you lose too much blood, you're dead. This is how we keep in check the check and balance system of mom having enough blood, baby having enough blood to continue to develop his womb. Small blood vessels carry the fetus blood and they run through to the placenta, which is full of maternal blood. Nutrients and oxygen from the mother's blood are transferred to the fetal blood, while waste products are transferred from the fetal blood to the maternal blood, without the two blood supplies mixing. So basically, mom gives the baby the nutrients, vitamins, and everything that it needs, and then baby, for the waste products, gives it back to mom through her blood system, and then mom is then able to expel all of these or whatever the baby is discarding or the waste for the baby. The placenta is expelled from the uterus in a process called afterbirth. You may be familiar with that. I don't quite remember mine, but I've heard that they press on your stomach really hard to make sure there's no blood clots and things of that nature, and in some way is taken out of the body, which is the reason why the lady, a witch and a nurse that worked at the hospital, was able to have a large bag full of placentas, because that's a part of your body that's like shed off. After you've had your baby, you really don't have any need for your placenta or the umbilical cord. So you apparently get a new one of those when you have multiple births or more than one baby. The next question is, what is the umbilical cord and what does it do? The umbilical cord is a lifeline that attaches the placenta to the uterus. The umbilical cord is made up of 3 blood vessels, 2 smaller arteries which carry blood to the placenta, and a larger vein which returns blood to the fetus. So it's like a back and forth, almost like a hose where the water comes through and things of that nature, and there's a two-way flow. You can turn it off or you can turn it on with the water, allowing the baby enough cord to safely move about without causing damage to the cord or the placenta. And as the baby gets bigger, of course, there's less room for the baby to move around. But when the baby is small, the cord, it allows them to freely, float around in the amniotic fluid on the inside of the mother's abdomen. After the baby is born, the cord is cut. The remaining section will heal and form the baby's belly button. So, proof of all this and the existence of all of this takes baby's belly button. So, Proof of all this and the existence of all of this taking place is you being able to look down and see your belly button, because that's where they clipped or cut the umbilical cord, and that's how it healed over, and a portion of it falls off, but your belly button is then formed and shaped from the healing process. Move about and everything on your own independently without the help of your mother. Next question: what is the amniotic sac and what does it do? The amniotic sac is filled with the amniotic fluid. This sac is your baby's home, their gymnasium and protection from outside knocks, bumps, and other external pressures. If you've ever felt a pregnant woman's stomach, it's extremely hard. It's almost like a beach ball or something. And the reason it's hard is to protect, like they said, the baby. If you run into something, or if you're ever hit or something of that nature by accident or on purpose, then that's the protective barrier. The amniotic sac allows the fetus ample room to swim and move about, which helps build muscle and tone. To keep the baby cozy, the amniotic sac and fluid maintain a slightly higher temperature. The amniotic sac in general and the fluid that's in the amniotic sac is 99.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so at week 10, there is around 30 milliliters of fluid present. The amniotic fluid, which reaches its peak around weeks 34 through 36, about a liter of fluid in there. So when the water breaks, it is the sac that ruptures, and the fluid that leaves the body is the amniotic fluid. The protective layer is gone. Whatever is keeping mom's stomach inflated and hard, it's gone because the baby is ready to come out. Your baby's and hard, it's gone because the baby is ready to come out. Your baby's life is still being supported by the umbilical cord. At the end of all this, the umbilical cord is the last thing keeping you and your child together and continuing to support the life that is growing on the inside of you after the amniotic fluid has dissipated or leaked out or your water has broken. Well, they ask a question: are the placenta, umbilical cord, and amniotic sac different when dealing with multiple births? Which is a good question. The example says, identical twins often share the same placenta, usually have separate amniotic sacs, and always have their own umbilical. Developing fetuses can share the same placenta, but they typically have their own other stuff individually. Non-identical twins, however, have separate placentas, amniotic sacs, and umbilical cords, which is why they typically don't look alike. It's a completely different seed that created them, and everything. You can see then how important these support items are to the baby and the mother. They are so close to the baby that they are like the baby in spiritual importance. So things can happen in the womb before birth. According to Genesis 25:21 through 24, we was to become the usurper. Verse 21, Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. Verse 22 says, the babies jolted each other within her, and she said, why is this? Went to inquire of the Lord. Verse 23, the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Verse 24, separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Verse 24, when the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. Verse 25, the first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau. 26, after this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. In Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 6 through, it says, and this is still under the guise that things can happen in the womb before birth. Verse 6 says, remember him before the silver cord is severed and the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring and the wheel broken at the well returns to the ground. it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. The umbilical cord is like the silver cord that links the child to life. It is very important and is the link to all things spiritual and physical. Curses and shock or trauma on the mother can transfer evil spiritual activators to open doors to demonic influences in unborn children through these support paraphernalia. So basically, they're saying if mom undergoes any sort of trauma, shower the child to have complications, and it opens the door for the enemy, because trauma in and of itself causes its own set of issues and challenges. Whether it's flashbacks, whether it's going to that same place and being in shocked or being frozen with fear as a result of what previously happened there, because you're still there in that place. It reminds you and calls back to you what happened there. And it may have happened at nighttime, let's say, and it's now daytime, and you're going with a support system. You have people with you, and it's now daytime, and you're going with a support system. You have people with you, and you still may be pulled back into that situation. Although the environment is different and maybe more bright and more pleasant, you still can be mentally and physically pulled back into that place of whatever caused the trauma. It could be an accident. Mom and baby could get into a car accident, and that could cause trauma and open the door for evil spiritual activators. You got to realize that as a human, things that happen to our body, also our mind takes a snapshot of it and remembers and recalls what happened. It recalls the sound of the amps and voices and things going on around you. It recalls the sight of the car. It recalls maybe the conversation that was happening prior to the accident, or what music was playing on the radio, or just anything that you saw, that you felt, that you heard prior to, during, or after the trauma, the incident, the accident. Memory, it can be etched and seared into your mind, your mental thoughts, and your process, and even your reactions. And I remember when I was in college at Bennett, and I would come home on the weekends to work, and there was a woman that would come in there, and we would give her food. She was a homeless woman. Come in there, and we would give her food. She was a homeless woman. And sometimes she would have money, like she would be counting out change and things of that nature. And other times she wouldn't. And sometimes the manager, in order to get her to go away or whatever, would just give her something so she could go. She was pregnant, and she was approximately maybe 8 months pregnant. She was huge. And she was about to give birth. She came in one day, and like I said, I may not have already said, but she had a crack addiction or drug addiction. A lot of times when women have addictions, in order to get the drug, if they don't have job or a money or income source, then they will be prostituted, or they will be asked to do or complete sexual favors in order for the drug dealer or whomever the supplier is to give them drugs for that time. So she came in, like I said, 8 months pregnant, huge stomach, big as can be. Someone, and I'm assuming her drug dealer or whatever, had literally beaten her so bad when she came in. At this point, some healing had taken place, but her eyes were blood. Her eye on, I believe it was the left-hand side, was like bloodshot red. I'm surprised it was still in the socket. It was swollen. It was red. It was horrible and hideous. And for me, my concern, I'm like, she's 8 months pregnant. So you've beat up a pregnant woman and therefore traumatized her child as well. So that's just a real life example. And we have to realize also that although the pregnant woman may stop crying, may stop having an anxiety attack, or may resume normal breathing, her blood pressure may come down, her stress level may subside, the child does not have that regulatory system to do that as she does. So the child is still in turbulence and still experiencing trauma and in shock, and experiencing all of these emotional sensors and dings in their brain and in their heart beating fast and palpitations and things of that nature that they can't regulate, because their system is not mature enough or developed enough to regulate that as their mothers is. So that's just once again a real life example of how trauma can open the door for evil, for spirits to come in. And as a developing fetus, you have no way to ward that off. You have no way to shut that down or to even stand against that. Things also happen after the baby is born from the mother. All right. So most people stand against that. Things also happen after the baby is born from the mother. All right. So most people are so carried away with the birth of a new baby and they don't bother about what's happening to the afterbirth. Christians need to be alert. According to 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 8, the New King alert. According to 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 8, the New King James Version says, verse 8, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. Most times, the devil waits for these support systems to be delivered out of the mother. And while the mother is in her weak state, and the time of birth and labor is usually the mother's weakest spiritual state. And it's also been said that we as women are closest to death when we're giving birth to our child or children. Other family members are agents, collects, and then goes and uses them for evil activities calculated to disrupt the life, glory, stars, and destiny of the unsuspecting child. And the example previously that they gave was the lady, educated, she's a nurse. She's also a witch. So she's leaving the hospital with a large bag of people. She's going to do something to them, taking it to her coven to do things to them and pronounce curses and speak death and speak calamity and all of these things on the child who was just born, who has nothing to do with anything and unsuspecting. And the family also, because if you harm the child, you're inadvertently harming the parents, the mother, the father, the grandparents, whomever loves and respects this child. So these are things that are happening in real life, in real time. We also have to know and note that there are different ways to know when your placenta, umbilical cord, or amniotic fluid have been tampered with for negative results. Number one is when it is like the heavens are completely blocked and there is no way out at all. So this feeling, this experience could be an indication that your body parts and your internal body makeup has been tampered with. The second is when you keep on living a life that is identical to that which your mother lived and only the negative aspects of her life manifest in yours. Another way to look at it is generational curses. Your mom gets pregnant at 14, you get pregnant at 14. Your mom gets addicted to drugs, you get addicted to drugs. Your mom is prostituting, you're prostituting. Things of that nature. And the third one is if anything you want to do or carry out with your spouse is always known to your mother when you didn't tell her. And she may be involved in witchcraft or something of that nature, because it's almost like she's monitoring you or surveying you and your husband or your spouse, because how is she supposed to know? She could be listening to conversations. I've heard tale of, if you want to tune in to specific conversations and be privy to information, that he would allow you to do so, especially if it's to kill, to steal, or to destroy. It could be to destroy the marriage. So he would definitely be game and supply you with whatever it is that you need to accomplish that goal, because it equates with his end goal. Number 4, when it is time to marry, you cannot separate yourself from her apron strings. Either you are male or female. And I've seen this happen in personal life. Number 5 is when you must still borrow money from your mother before you can do the most basic things. And that's just desiring dependency, desiring for somebody to want and to need you and to have to come to you for everything. That's also control. And there may be an element of manipulation in that relationship as well, that you're being used and you don't know that you're being used for their own personal gain, for them to feel wanted and needed, for them to feel like you need me, I'm a good mother, and I'm the provider, and I'm this and I'm that. So needed for them to feel like you need me, I'm a good mother, and I'm the provider, and I'm this and I'm that. So that could also play into the mix. Number 6 is when you are experiencing a continuous barrage of issues and problems, and it looks like it will never end. Some individuals are crisis prone, which means if there's not a crisis in their life, they don't know how to function. So they function best or better in the midst of a crisis. We're going to finish out this list and then we'll reconvene on next week week with part 2. Number 7 is when your mother gave birth to you easily, but you are having problems doing the same. So apparently mom had an easy birth and you have problems and challenges and difficulties giving birth to a child. Number 8 is when it's obvious that someone else is using your glory to prosper while you are living like a pauper. Basically, something has been spoken over you to keep you in poverty, to keep you beneath. It's like you are tied to a post like a goat and you have limitations. You can't go beyond a certain level. There could be a word curse that has been sent out into the atmosphere that you will not have this, you will not have that, you will not move out of this place, you will not have a certain level of success, and you'll feel trapped and you'll feel like there's something, maybe something, or this place of beneathness, this place of lack, this place of wanting, this place of poverty. Number 9, when you display an inordinate attraction for the opposite sex, constantly, but not for normal relationships, but for immoral and ungodly ties. That is pretty much self-explanatory. So you don't have the proper affection for men, and it's almost like manipulation or the Jezebel spirit where you want to control them. So you'll be intimate with them, you'll be in a surface relationship with them, but you're trying to get their money, or you're trying to get their power, or that you're trying to get some other personal need met. And we know from previous shows that lust wants to get and love wants trying to get some other personal need met. And we know from previous shows that lust wants to get and love wants to give. So you're not able to operate in love because you're worried about getting whatever it is that you can from this person, and honestly draining them and becoming a sort of leech for this person and this individual, and that unhealthy, ungodly leech for this person and this individual, and that unhealthy, ungodly, immoral relationship. So next week we're going to pick up with more scripture, and we're going to go over a prayer that will help to destroy, will help to disconnect, will help to break, will help to annihilate prayerfully the effects of the umbilical cord curse or anything that may have entered while you were yet in your mother's womb, while you were unsuspecting, while you were developing, that critical time period. If anything, any doors were opened or anything came through, the prayer that we will pray and the prayer points will help to rectify that situation. And only God has the final say so about where you have been, where you are, and where you are going. You are simply in the process of becoming who God created, ordained, purposed, and destined you to be. Until next time, miracles and blessings to you today and every day.
Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world